3,000 foreign-born arrested, denied lawyers, held without charges for 3 months.
John T. Scopes had decided to test a new Tennessee law that forbade the teaching of any theory that denied the divine creation of man.
Putting American citizens into concentration camps is unforgivable.
Students don't shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate.
I wanted to tell you what marriage meant to me, why we want it and why we need it.
And that is the right of Richard and Mildred Loving to go to sleep at night.
Supreme Court today legalized abortion.
We are marching into Skokie to dramatize that there is no free speech for National Socialists.
Principle of equal justice.
Equal justice under law applied to us, too.
Good morning.
The state legislature again passed the heartbeat bill, and the ACLU of Ohio immediately promised to sue.
The ACLU is launching a smart justice campaign.
Protecting women, protecting LGBT individuals, protecting the right to privacy.
And we're going to keep fighting for our employment, for our health care, for our survival in absolutely every context.
Whether it's in the courtroom or in the halls of Congress.
Well, we'll be ready to do it. We have to. We're in for the fight of our lives.
Are you ready to fight for justice? Are you ready to fight for our immigrant brothers and sisters?
We are marching for the right to vote in this country, and we came here to say we are still marching.
Americans are turning away from the death penalty.
They're activating, mobilizing. That's how it's going to break.
Never stop talking about my abortion!
No family should have to fear being torn apart because they are supporting their trans child.
And so we must say no. And we say no with our voice, and we say no with our votes.
How do we speak up? Vote! How do we speak up? Vote!
Together, we aim to build a nation where every person can achieve the highest potential, unhampered by institutional racism.
Every year, we face bills that single out transgender people.
These aren't just Mississippi problems. They are challenges that we all must face together.
We have a lot of work to do in the states where the battle for civil liberties and civil rights still rages on. And whenever you get bummed out about what's going on in the world, I want you to think about what the world would look like if we didn't do this.
If you ask, will we fight? Yes, we will fight!
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tamaya Cox-Toure, and I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU of Oklahoma. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm so excited that you are here today with us for our annual legislative wrap-up. It is no surprise when we say that session was difficult this year. We were at a time in a moment where we did not expect to see so many attacks on civil liberties as we did. But one thing that we do know and we are aware is that the ACLU of Oklahoma was there at the Capitol every day, ensuring that we are fighting for the rights of all Oklahomans. Now, that fight sometimes took the form of talking to members about why they shouldn't pass a bill, but it was also being proactive, and we are proud of the proactive bills and legislation that we saw pass, or more importantly, that we know it's on the path to becoming law. We are so excited that this was actually the first session of our new policy director, Cindy Wing. She came from the YWCA, really working on matters of direct services to domestic abuse survivors. But she really was able to shift kind of all that direct service work to ensuring that our rights were protected under the dome. So we really wanted an opportunity, again, for us to talk about comprehensively what this session looked like. But more importantly, we wanted an opportunity for you all to know about what's to come in upcoming sessions. We can't do this work without you. We really want to ensure that we continue to be the powerhouse under the dome that we are, but we know that it takes more than just us being at the Capitol. And when we think about policy, we really think about policy impacts community, and for us to ensure that we are hearing. It is important for us to hear from the community about what's happening under the dome. So for the next few minutes, you're going to have an opportunity to hear from our policy director about what we did, our work under the dome. And then you're going to hear from our organizer about upcoming events. We truly believe that we believe in this integrated advocacy format, that what happens under the dome impacts what's happening in our community. And most importantly, what we want is the other way, what's happening in our community to impact what's happening under the dome. So with that, I will kick it to Cindy to talk to you about everything we did this session and what to expect maybe in the upcoming sessions. Cindy?
Thanks, Tamaya. Hi, everyone. I am the new policy director for ACLU Oklahoma. My pronouns are she, her, and like Tamaya said, I come from a background of direct service work, so I had to use a lot of grounding, deep breathing techniques, especially when you are under that dome every single day trying to lobby for rights and civil liberties. So like Tamaya said, the 2022 Oklahoma legislative session has been one of the most difficult and least transparent sessions of date for rights and civil liberties. We have seen a range of bills attacking teachers and librarians with censorship. We have seen the most restrictive abortion ban in the country pass right in this legislative session in our state. We've seen the expansion of criminalization through fines and fees legislation and additional penalties for people who can't pay. We have also seen countless attacks time and time again after our 2S LGBTQ plus youth, especially students. And lastly, we have also seen efforts that have restricted the voting process even more, especially when it comes to the initiative petition process, which we know most of the progressive reforms in our state have come from, such as the expansion of Medicaid and healthcare, the talking about criminal legal reform, as well as medical marijuana. So we have also seen that even though both chambers have adjourned regular session on May 27th on Friday, they continue to meet in special session. So they had a second and third special legislative session. The third one was called by the governor. So they are in a bit of a standstill right now. Both houses are fighting with one another as well as Governor Stitt. But the funny thing is that our governor managed to unite both Democrats as well as Republicans in their disdain for him. So both houses continue to meet to dole out ARPA funding, which is the American Rescue Plan Act funding. So they continue to meet to dole that out, and they have just approved the state budget for 2023. So what is included in the state budget is a less than 1% increase for educators as well as students. So as you may know, that a 1% increase in this time of all the inflation has little to no relief for educators or students. We have also seen continued increases for law enforcement, especially highway patrol officers. We have also seen a $700 million incentive for a car battery company, Panasonic, that may or may not come to our state. And what was really interesting about that was that we saw about 10 lawmakers actually sign into a letter stating that they didn't even want Panasonic to come to our state because of their pro-2S LGBTQ plus stances. So again, there's plenty of infighting at the Capitol. If you ever want to watch something on your day off, I don't recommend watching it or watching them debate on the floor. However, we were at the Capitol every single day fighting a lot of bills, and a lot of the bills that have passed include, as you may know, the most restrictive abortion ban in the country. So what that entails is that it starts at fertilization, which fertilization can happen even before somebody becomes pregnant. It includes that bounty hunter enforcement mechanism, which is what I prefer to call it, because that fine or fee does not go toward the state. It goes towards the person that is choosing to sue anybody who is aiding or abetting anybody who helps obtain that abortion. So Providers in our state have already stopped providing all abortions because they don't want to be sued. We have seen that same style of bill pass in Texas. In fact, a lot of the clinics here have seen a 2,500% increase because of these type of abortion bans. Because a lot of Texas patients were coming to Oklahoma, and now both Oklahoma and Texas patients have to seek abortion somebody else to get that vital health care that they do need. So we know that because of that total abortion ban, both Planned Parenthood as well as the Center for Repro Rights are taking these bills to court. We also saw attacks on our 2S LGBTQ+ youth, especially students in schools. The first one of being the school sports ban, or the school sports ban on trans women and girls. So this one kind of flew under the radar of both our organization as well as coalition partners because the way that it passed. So SB 2 was a carryover bill from 2021. So not only were we having to track bills from this legislative session, we were also worried about carryover bills. So it was carried over from last year and it was placed on the Senate floor, I believe around 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. So we are consistently having to track bills from the middle of the night into the early mornings. And the reason it was placed on the bill so late, or placed on the agenda so late, was because of a very, very contentious school voucher bills in which people are still seeing the repercussions of. So it was promised, and word under the Capitol was that any senator who voted for that school voucher bill got to hand select which bills they wanted to be heard on the floor the next day. SB 2, that transgender sports ban for women and girls, as well as collegiate level athletes, which was one of the first in the nation that we have seen, was placed on the floor at 1 or 2 a.m. It was voted on that very same day. And that is the type of work that is being happening under the dome if we're not paying attention. And again, they make this process difficult on purpose, especially if we're not paying attention. Not only that, we also saw the gender marker ban on birth certificates for non-binary, two-spirit, and gender diverse Oklahomans. It was one of the first gender marker bans that involved birth certificates for non-binary people that have passed in the country. So a lot of firsts for our country and our states. At the ACLU, we firmly believe that everybody needs access to accurate documentation that reflects their gender identity. If you don't have accurate representation of your identity, you can be subject to a lot of violence and harassment and the denial of benefits. And because we believe this, we are working very closely with our partners at Lambda Legal, who will be taking that to court as well. And then lastly, this is probably the one that you may be most familiar with, is the school bathroom ban. So SB 615 is a school bathroom ban for trans students with a threat of a 5% state funding cut for school districts who refuse to comply. As if we fund schools well off to do this in the first place. I believe it is also the first in the nation that I've seen a bill in which it threatens a state funding cut for school districts, meaning that they have to either follow the Biden administration to say that we want to be able to follow Title IX as well as the Civil Rights Act and treat trans students equitably and allow them to use the restrooms they would like to use, or follow state guidelines and not allow trans students to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity. So again, we have seen the Attorney General as well as Education Secretary Ryan Walters encourage this type of legislation to attack our 2S LGBTQ+ communities in schools. We know that trans people and trans students are one of the most marginalized and vulnerable populations, and to consistently encourage these type of attacks is significantly concerning. We are expecting to see even more attacks on bodily autonomy. We know that there's no liberation for people who can become pregnant without liberation for trans and two-spirit folks as well, because it all comes down to bodily autonomy and sovereignty. We also see attacks on classroom and teachers and school librarians. We saw attacks, especially coming from House Bill 3092. So this was a bill by Representative Hilbert, and it would require school libraries to maintain books and any kind of materials that are, quote, reflective of community standards. Meaning, whatever you may think it means, it depends on the community, right? It depends on the people in positions of power at that library. We have already seen, and we know that policy work doesn't only happen under the dome, it also happens out in communities where you all live. We have seen public school libraries and other public libraries, such as the Enid Public Library, come under significant attacks because they attempted to censor and ban any programs and materials and displays related to 2S LGBTQ plus people or anything to do with gender identity as well as sexuality. So not only did we see about over 25 bills related to classroom censorship in school libraries be introduced in the 2022 legislative session. We also saw library boards take that type of language and implement it into their own communities as well. And lastly, we have our criminal legal reform bills. This is where we saw the most hope and progress, actually. So we saw a lot of criminal legal reforms bills, especially having to do with expungement. So we saw House Bill 3316, which is Representative Miller's bill. We're super excited to see that. That is an automatic expungement bill. So anybody who meets the clean slate eligibility process, they are able to have their records sealed automatically. We know that the expungement process is incredibly time consuming. You have to meet a lot of the requirements and it's costly. So this automatic expungement process can help over 100,000 Oklahomans in the upcoming years. We have also seen bills allowing formerly incarcerated folks to gain licenses in industries that are not related to their convictions. So expanding job opportunities and economic growth as well. We've seen bills allowing the parole to be a lot more accessible to people, especially if they are about to be discharged in the next 6 months. However, the caveat with that is that as long as the DAs do not object to the person that is applying for parole. So I always say we take the wins where we can get them. We have also seen bills that allow courts to either waive a fine or fee, lower the fine or fee, or allow people to pay later if they lose their job or source of income in the process. This is probably one of the most exciting bills we have seen pass this legislative session because we know fines and fees are really things that target people who live in poverty and people who can't access these type of things. So we're really excited to see all those criminal legal reform advancements advance out of legislative session. We've also seen bills in which we have fought tooth and nail at the Capitol, trying to prevent them from passing the session. And thankfully, we were able to kill a lot of bills. And these are the type of bills that a lot of people may not realize, because if you kill a bill, you don't really get to talk about it, right? However, some of the bills that we were able to defeat include Senate Bill 1142. This is probably the one that you may recognize because it made a lot of news. It was Representative Stanridge's censorship bill for classrooms and teachers. So what the bill would have probably done, it would have prohibited educators and librarians from being able to maintain any books or relevant materials that is related to sexuality, gender identity or anything to do with sex ed. So it was a huge concern for our organization as well as coalition partners. And we were able to work with other coalition partners to defeat and stop the bill in its tracks. We also saw things that were especially concerning for us when it came to bodily autonomy get defeated. So we saw Senate Bill 1225. So Senate Bill 1225, it would have prevented minors from being able to self-consent to birth control. So we always say that not only are they coming after abortions, they're also coming after things beyond abortion, such as birth control, such as the right to self-consent, to have access to contraceptives. And we are expecting to see even more bills restricting bodily autonomy next legislative session. We also saw House Bill 2973 by Representative Olson. This is one we were particularly excited about to help defeat in its early tracks. I believe we defeated it during committee meetings. So it was a bill by Representative Olson, which was the first pro-conversion therapy bill in the nation, which I haven't seen it in other states at least. It would have prevented any political entity, nonprofit, any type of agency in the state to prevent a conversion therapy bill. So essentially, it was a pro-conversion therapy bill that we were able to defeat as well. And then we also have House Bill 3240. This was one of the bills that we were the most concerned about because of the significant impact it would have on trans, two-spirit, and gender diverse youth in our state. So House Bill 3240, it would have banned gender-affirming healthcare for trans youth, meaning that youth who were receiving healthcare that they needed, which I call it a suicide prevention act, they would have had to stop providing this type of healthcare for trans, two-spirit, as well as gender diverse youth in Oklahoma. So that was House Bill 3240. Thank goodness we were able to stop it in its tracks. So I know there has been a lot of doom and gloom whenever it comes to the bills that we are seeing pass this legislative session, but we also see a lot of wins when it comes to defeating a lot of the bills. And lastly, with House Bill 3093, this was probably the one that got the most traction. A lot of advocates and supporters were able to stop this bill along with us, as well as the Justice for Julius Jones Coalition as well. So House Bill 3093 would have put severe, strict legal limits on the death penalty commutation cases, meaning that the Pardon and Parole Board could only provide leniency in terms of life without the possibility of parole. So no chance of relief in sight, no chance of being able to allow somebody to go outside, to be able to meet their families and be released from prisons and behind bars. It also said that the Pardon and Parole Board could not hear any claims of innocence, meaning that if they did grant leniency at all, it was only going to be based on mercy and leniency and not on the basis of innocence. So that was a particularly egregious bill. We were very, very concerned about that, but we were also able to beat that as well. And then lastly, we know, like I said, policy work doesn't just happen under the dome. Election day is next Tuesday, June 28th. And while we don't endorse any particular candidate, we are paying very close attention to the DA race because we know that these are the people who have the most power in our state. They are the ones that choose whether or not to prosecute individuals in our state. And with all of the abortion bans especially, we have already seen and heard prosecutors and DA candidates go after people as a result of their pregnancy. So we are paying close attention to not only things that happen under the dome, we are also paying close attention to anything that happens outside of the communities as well, because we know that policy work doesn't just happen under the dome. So that is it for our wrap up. I will go ahead and hand it to Jasmine, our statewide organizer.
Actually, before we do that, Cindy, we actually have a few questions for you. So we know that we're kind of in special session 2 or special session 3, one of the special sessions. Could you talk to us a little about, are there any bills that the ACLU is tracking or anything that participants should keep an eye on?
Great question. Yes. So thank you for flagging for that. So special session, like I said, they were doling out a lot of American Rescue Plan acts, and they were also talking about restructuring the tax infrastructure. So there were a lot of talks about Governor Stitt vetoing 2 bills that the legislature has actually sent him. So the first one was the tax rebate, meaning that I believe if you were single, you would have received $75. If you were married, you would have received $150. That was vetoed. There was also a bill that vetoed the state grocery sales tax. So we saw both of those bills, but we continue to see the legislature talk about even more tax cuts, especially for incomes. So I will also get you those particular bill numbers, but most of the special session has been talking about inflation relief in terms of cutting taxes, especially for people with means.
And Cindy, you talked a little bit about this being a really tough session. Is there anything that you kind of contribute as to why this session may have been tougher? I recognize this is your first session, but may have been more difficult than others. And if so, could you talk to us a little about what that is so we can be prepared for maybe next session?
Yes, so I joke that I chose one of the more wild sessions to have as my first session because it's election season. And I don't want to say that election season is the result of all of these bills being introduced. However, a lot of what is happening is because a lot of people are trying to score a lot of political points. We see that the attacks on trans youth come from people who are wanting to run for re-election. We saw also a lot of these abortion bans that have a lot to do with bodily autonomy, with trans rights as well, be introduced by people who are trying to run again. So we see a lot of these people trying to score political points this legislative session, which makes it a lot more difficult, and trying to rally the base to make those headlines for a lot of these egregious bills, and which we know are completely unconstitutional and which is going to cost our state a lot of money, but they choose to pass these type of bills anyway, so they can make the news at the detriment, especially for trans youth.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well. And I think that maybe leads to my next question is that we know that we do have maybe a contentious election cycle coming up. Are there any issues, maybe we don't have bill numbers or anything, but are there any issues that we could expect to see next session that maybe we could start preparing for right now?
Yeah, so a lot of the bills that I expect to see have to do with bodily autonomy, just because we saw the success of House Bill 4327 pass out of the state legislature. So that was the total and complete abortion ban. However, like I said, they're not going to stop there. They're going to go after birth control for teens. And I wouldn't be surprised if they tried that even further. I also wouldn't be surprised if they tried to pass a travel ban. We have seen these travel bans pass out of other states as well. So we are seeing significant increases of abortion bans and restrictions. I also would not be surprised if we saw even more classroom censorship bills. So like I said, we saw over 25 be introduced this legislative session. Thank goodness only one has passed. Does not mean that they are going to stop there, especially with all of the attacks on educators and teachers. Also wouldn't be surprised if we saw these type of bills be copied and pasted outside of our Under the Dome as well.
I guess my last question before I think I see one more question is that we really talk about session happening between February and May, but a lot of that work happens outside of those months. what is the role of the ACLU when session is over regarding policy? And what do you see your work really looking like? And how can people get involved in policy work when session's not in?
Yeah, I say policy doesn't end under the dome. There are not only election season coming up, but also interim studies. So if you are very interested in not only following bills, but also seeing what the lawmakers are interested in and worried about and what they want to pass, I highly recommend following interim studies, which happen, I believe, September through October for this year. If it wasn't an election year, it would go all the way through November as well. So interim studies are a way in which we can also make our voices heard by asking our lawmakers to request an interim study on particular subjects. The bills that have the most success, at least that I have seen in my first legislative session, have all come from interim studies, especially when it comes to fines and fees legislation. So the deadline to request an interim study from your lawmaker, I believe, is Friday, June 24th. So it's coming up. So I highly encourage contacting your lawmakers, asking them if they can request one. And the role that we play is that not only are we attending committee meetings in regular legislative session, we are also attending those type of committee meetings and providing fact sheets and asking people and making sure that people outside who are unable to attend these meetings are, one, aware that it's happening, and two, asking the right questions whenever it comes to these type of studies as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And from one lobbyist to another lobbyist, you did a fantastic job representing the ACLU under the dome, and we're really appreciative of that. Real quickly, I just want to add that we really see that our work regarding our legal work is really reflected or impacted by what happens at the Capitol. So last year, if participants remember, we had a bill, House Bill 1775, which was our original classroom censorship bill. It was signed into law, and we filed a lawsuit of last fall. And that lawsuit, just as a quick update, that lawsuit is currently making its way through the process. We had over 20 plus defendants that we sued, and we're really looking to we're really excited about when we can present that case in front of the court. We had submitted and asked for a preliminary injunction, meaning that the court would stop the bill or stop the law from going into effect. It's in effect right now, but temporarily stopping the law, because what we're seeing is what we expected and was what we talked about when this bill was even passed, was that there was this was not an issue. Schools were doing an amazing job of teaching correct and comprehensive history. And that's really what we believed would be blocked when we saw these quote unquote divisive concepts or quote unquote anti-CRT laws making its way through the country. We were the first and have been the first state to file against this. So we're in a very preliminary stages and in the very beginnings of this lawsuit. And as soon as hopefully we get a favorable ruling, we will ensure that states, won't prohibit the comprehensive education of our students. But right now, in the midst of some of the very bad legislation that was passed, we are still monitoring. As Cindy said earlier, 2 of the abortion bills, the most egregious abortion bills that passed, have already been, a lawsuit has already been filed by the Center for Reproductive Rights, as well as Planned Parenthood. So those are our partners, and we've been working closely with them. While we are not attorneys on that case, we are following it very closely and offering any support that we can. But we're also working with our national office and our other partners around some of the anti-2S LGBTQ plus bills. And we're currently monitoring and trying to figure out, if and when there is an opportunity to file lawsuits where we can. That's working, again, we're working very closely with our coalition partners to decide what our next moves are, but we're definitely monitoring those very closely. And we recognize that, again, it all flows together. What's happening under the dome when there are attacks under the dome that we're unable to stop there, we do just decide and determine if we can file a lawsuit in that area. I think the other question regarding what Cindy had said around the district attorney candidates and kind of shifting the model that while we don't endorse candidates, we really look closely to elections, right? We recognize that elections have a true impact on our policy work. And, potentially we really want to think about our proactive agendas and priorities. So of course we're looking to the district attorneys, not just because of the role they could play in some of these really harsh abortion bills, but there also tend to be obstacles in our criminal justice reform work as well. So in district attorney races, one of the things that we really hope that voters will look to will be, where district attorneys are on ending cash bail. Where are they on fines and fees? Because they played the biggest role in those areas. We're really want to empower voters to ask those hard questions, where they are on the death penalty, where our district attorneys are on, will they prosecute a person who ended their pregnancy? Those are the type of questions that could be asked to really help and shape and give information on how a person can decide to vote. On the other level, on another note, there are many great debates that are happening and have happened that people have recorded, that people can learn more about all of the races and upcoming races that are happening this election cycle, and they can simply go to resources like NonDoc, who has held a few of the debates. We definitely believe, lastly, we definitely believe in being good partners and good resource. So that is one thing we're currently trying to figure out, is like where we can be a good resource in the sense of asking those questions to candidates, and then making sure that that information is available. So please keep in mind and keep looking to us when we do start working on our election work and our electoral work to help with those answers that you may have. Lastly, I want to bring up Jasmine, our state organizer. Jasmine will talk to us about ways that you can get involved and go from there.
Thanks, Maya. Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine Brown-Dietrich. Pronouns are she, her, and I am the statewide organizer for the ACLU of Oklahoma. Thanks you all so much for joining us today. I just want to leave you with a couple tidbits of ways that you can get involved with us in the near future. Coming up this weekend, the ACLU team will be at OKC Pride Fest. We will be marching in the parade on Saturday morning, and we would love for each and every one of you to join us. I'm dropping in the chat right now the registration link. So if you would like to register to join us to walk in the parade, we really want to have a very large crowd. We typically do have a large crowd, and we want to keep that going this year. So if you want to register to join us, the parade is on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. We will be, once you register, we will be able to get your information and send out the further details about lineup on Thursday evening. We'll get that email to you. Otherwise, outside of that event, there are multiple ways to be involved with the ACLU of Oklahoma. One being just simply signing up on our website to become a volunteer, a part of our volunteer network. That just looks like being available to make calls to legislators during legislative session, or maybe that looks like coming to our events and being in community and space with us as we have events in our areas. And then another way is to sign up for our rapid response team. Our rapid response team is a team of volunteers who goes a little bit further. It goes a little bit further than the average volunteer. These are our folks that we call up when we know that there are bad bills that are on the floor that need immediate attention from our supporters. So this team of folks really, we call upon this team when we really needed help in an urgent time. And so thank you, Cassie, for dropping the link to sign up for those volunteer opportunities. We'd love to have you. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. If you're interested in having more conversations in your community, also please let me know. I will drop my information in the chat. But otherwise, thank you all so much, and I'll pass it back to you, Tamaya.
Thanks, Jasmine. So with that, we wanted to real quickly, if there are any additional questions that anyone has, we wanted to make sure that we gave you time to ask any questions that you may have. So we'll just give a few minutes. We are really interested in hoping that you would consider, again, walking with us. We've done a few town hall meetings and events in different cities. And if that is something, if you are from a rural area and you think the ACLU should consider having a town hall event in your area, please reach out to Jasmine. That is one thing we are really looking to do this summer, is kind of take our show on the road. So if that is something you may be interested in helping us host, please let us know. Again, we are unable to do this work without your amazing support. So we really do want to encourage you to consider one, volunteering with us and working with us as well. And as always, please consider a donation to the ACLU so we can continue doing the amazing legislative work that we are doing under the dome. So, yep, and join our rapid response team. As always, we really want to thank you for your time this afternoon. We look forward to continuing to work with you all and being in community with you all. And with that, that is the end of our legislative wrap up. So we hope that you will enjoy the rest of your day and looking forward to you volunteering, working somehow with the ACLU. And thanks for joining us today.